What does it mean for your life to matter? Is the drive to matter sometimes stronger than the drive to survive? We humans talk a lot about happiness and pleasure and meaning, but what if the real engine underneath all of it is the need to feel that we count? Is it possible that depression and extremism and ambition all stem from the same psychological source? When is political polarization less about beliefs and more about threatened significance? Today, we're going to speak with philosopher and writer Rebecca Goldstein, who has written a new book on what matters to people and why it's not the same for everyone, and why mattering is a fundamental instinct that underlies all the others. Welcome to Inner Cosmos with me, David Eagleman. I'm a neuroscientist and author at Stanford, and in these episodes, we sail deeply into our 3-pound universe to understand how we experience the world. When I was younger, one of the great mentors I got to work with was Francis Crick, who had won the Nobel Prize for discovering the structure of DNA. As you may know, in the second half of Crick's career, he turned from studying genetics to studying the brain, and specifically the question of how the physical stuff of the brain gives rise to consciousness. Now, Crick had a chalkboard that was full of ideas and equations, but the most striking thing to me was that right in the middle of the board, outlined in a big, thick rectangle, was a single word. And this word represented to him one of the central mysteries of biology. The word was meaning. In other words, he had a better understanding than most people on the planet of the vast and intricate biology that makes up the human brain. But he recognized that one of the key questions was, why does anything matter to your brain? You can look at the visual system and you can come to understand how photons hit the retina and the signals move to the visual cortex in the back of the brain, and you can get a sense of how the signals move around and get processed and get a reasonable understanding of how this all works, from single cells to feedback at the global level that equates to expectations. And you can do the same thing with hearing and touch and so on. But no amount of that very important kind of science gives you insight into why anything matters. Why is there any meaning at all? In other words, why don't we just run like computers where we process signals and have inputs and outputs? Why do we instead care so much about our lives and accomplishments and whether people like us and whether events have meaning to us? Why do we ask whether we are doing something significant with our time? Now, there's a sense in which neuroscience speaks to this. We talk about reward circuitry and prediction errors and salience networks, and psychology gives us language about attention and bias and motivation. But behind the circuitry and the jargon, there's still a deep question. You might be objectively safe and fed and housed, and yet you need to feel that your life registers, that you're somehow making a dent somewhere. It's the difference between surviving and signifying. From a neuroscience point of view, that remains difficult territory to access. Evolution can explain why we care about food and shelter and reproduction, but we humans also care fiercely about other things, about whether our work is respected, whether our team wins, whether our group identity is affirmed, whether a text message gets answered, whether a stranger on the internet agrees with us, whether our absence would be noticed, whether someone is proud of us, whether we feel replaceable, whether our existence registers at all beyond the private theater of our own minds. And there's a related question. Why is one person willing to sacrifice everything for an artistic project that no one else understands, and another person finds fulfillment through family, and another through God, another through achievement, another through domination? same species, same brain architecture, but people can have very different maps of significance. So the question that's kept nagging at me ever since I saw that chalkboard in Francis Crick's office is this: what is the brain's code for meaning? What does it mean psychologically and neurologically for something to feel like it matters? Now, this question about mattering and the brain is a big interdisciplinary question. It lives at the intersection of neuroscience and psychology and philosophy. So I called my colleague, the philosopher Rebecca Goldstein, because she's been thinking about the issue of mattering for decades. How does this longing to matter shape our identity, our relationships, our cultures, and the political world that we're all trying to share? Goldstein has just written a new book on this called The Mattering Instinct, which is about this deep human drive, not just to survive, but to matter to ourselves and others. Rebecca Goldstein is a MacArthur Genius Fellow, a Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and she was awarded the National Humanities Medal by President Obama. So today we're going to explore her idea that each of us carries around a kind of inner mattering map that tells us who and what is significant. Here's my interview with Rebecca Goldstein. So, Rebecca, to get us oriented, what do you mean by the mattering instinct, and how do you explain that to people at dinner parties?
I think we are programmed to act on a very deep motivation that often goes hidden, but it is a longing to matter.
What do you mean by matter?
We use this word matter all over the place, the verb to matter. We talk about what matters and we talk about who matters. And I think its core meaning deep down is to be deserving of attention. So it has that notion of deservingness built into it, what philosophers call a normative concept, something that has to do with our values. So that term mattering already gets us into this domain of values. We want to know what's of value. We want to know who's of value. And our mattering instinct is that we desperately want ourselves to be among those who matter, who are deserving of attention. Interestingly, our own attention.
And you argue that this longing to matter is the crux of human motivation. What makes you feel that this longing to matter is more important than the pursuit of pleasure or truth or survival?
Yeah, many of us pursue our mattering by hedonistic pursuit of pleasure, of truth, of knowledge, of beauty, of creativity, of power, of fame. But beneath all of these things is this more basic motivation to prove that we are deserving of all of the attention that we have to give ourselves in order to live a coherently human life. And that is what I think the longing to matter is all about. And all these other motivations that give us the arc of the narrative of our life are ways of trying to respond to realize this deep longing. It's even more powerful than the longing to live, to survive. People will sacrifice their lives if they think that that's what's required in order to realize their mattering instinct, or in the very, very tragic cases where they think they can't, which is clinically known as depression, whose most characteristic expression is, I don't matter. Others do, but I don't, I can't, I never will. They will, in fact, often end their life or contemplate ending their life. So it's, I believe, deeper even than our instinct for survival.
How do you distinguish wanting to matter from the desire to be admired or loved? Are these different flavors? Are they trying to get at the same thing?
Freud had said that the two cornerstones of our humanness are love and work. And I would amend Freud in all humility to say that the two cornerstones of our humanness are our longing for connectedness, which is also involves mattering, but distinct from that as a separate motivation, this longing to matter. So connectedness, I think, has something to do with having people in our lives who will give us special attention, whether we deserve it or not. It's kind of unconditional. That's what we needed as the helpless creatures. We are born into a helplessness unmatched in the animal kingdom. It takes to our early adulthood for the last bits of our brain, where all the mature stuff takes place, to fall into place. So we're extremely dependent on other people. And we are like that for the rest of our lives, that there must be certain people that I count as those people who are in my life, my families, my friends, my, romantic partner, my colleagues, my neighbors, perhaps the members of my community, whose attention I feel is coming to me. And just as we felt as children that the attention of our family members were coming to us. And that's always in place. We are gregarious creatures, evolved from gregarious creatures, born into a great helplessness that takes a very long time for us to outgrow. That is connectedness. And connectedness has to do with our relationship with others. The mattering instinct has to do with our relationship with ourselves. And as I say, if it's not realized, we feel disgusted with ourselves. I've known people close to me who have gone into the deepest of depressions. And there's this kind of just self-loathing. They can't stand to be in the presence of themselves anymore. That shows that there is something that we all need. In their privation of this need, it shows up, like what a good life, a life of flourishing requires. And in the book, I define different strategies for satisfying the mattering instinct. And although I would say that we're all alike in sharing this deep motivation, in fact, what I think my most elegant expression for what our species is, creatures of matter who long to matter. And for some people, it really is the connectedness that we all need that does it. I call them socializers. That to have the people in their lives paying the attention to them that they require, it does it for them. That is how their mattering instinct is satisfied. And I think that's probably true for most people. I've been talking to people about this for over 4 decades now, just because I find it really interesting. I find the diversity of the way that people try to realize this common motivation fascinating. But there are other ways of doing it. It's still needing that connectedness. I think that's always a given in almost everybody's life. I know a few mathematicians who don't seem to need connectedness at all. But there are these other ways of doing it. The people I call transcenders, who seek their mattering in some sort of metaphysical belief about the nature of the universe, that there is some transcendent presence, whether they call it God or something else, who purposefully created them and whose purpose gives them their purpose, gives them what I call mattering project. That's what makes them feel as if they matter. So there are these transcenders, the religious, the spiritual. There are people I call heroic strivers. And they're not trying to really matter to others, not to other mortals, and not to, some transcendent being that they may believe exists. It's really a matter of some standards of excellence that they've set for themselves. Could be intellectual, artistic, athletic, ethical. and maybe some combination of those. That's what gives the purpose to their life. And then there are the competitors who understand this question of mattering in zero-sum terms. To matter to them means to matter more than others. So it's interesting when I talk to people about mattering, people hear that question, well, how do you go about your mattering? According to their strategy.
A central idea in your framework is the mattering map. What is a mattering map, and how does that differ from values or identity or personal narrative?
Yeah, it sort of contains all of those things, I think. But what I've noticed in this pretty long life at this point is that it's hard to live a human life. People need to feel like some purpose, something that gives some coherence to their life, and a life that's meaningful in their own eyes. But the projects that are taken on within these 4 strategies are so diverse, so many. I mean, pickup artists, and just reading today in the Washington Post about a man whose project was to walk the whole planet. He's almost done with it now. But that's his project. Or, I don't know if you saw that movie, Julia and Julie, about this young woman who liked to cook, but she was in the doldrums. I think she was a would-be writer, and it wasn't going anywhere. And her project was to make to perfection every recipe in Julia Child's cookbook, The Art of French Cooking. Tattoo artists, train spotters, analytic philosophers, mathematicians, saints. So there are many, many, many regions on the mattering map. And I think of these 4 strategies as the kind of continents of the mattering map. There are transcenders, many ways of being a transcender. Christianity itself has 44,000 worldwide denominations. Wars have been shed, I needn't say, over the disagreements among those who are very close on the mattering map. But, the way one defines this, and it does have to do very much with our identity and what we think we're about, what we're supposed to do here. As I say, what makes our lives, keeps us engaged in our lives. And when it dies, you're in bad shape. And you don't know how to go forward.
So in your book, you bring this idea to life through several stories. Scott Joplin, William James, a woman rescuing infants, a former neo-Nazi skinhead. Tell us about those people and how they matter to the story and what they represent about mattering.
Theory is theory, but to really bring these ideas alive, you have to look at people's lives, stories. I could just start with William James, actually. William James, who was a great favorite of mine, both a psychologist and a philosopher, multi-talented. He got a medical degree. First, he wanted to be an artist. He did have great artistic talent. His father was a kind of a religious thinker, a Swedenborgian, very supportive family, very supportive community, multi-talented, but he didn't know where to put his talents. He was what I call a heroic striver, somebody whose mattering instinct demands excellence in some or more areas, that they're very high standards of excellence. And he wasn't fulfilling those. He went from art to medicine, and he fell into a really deep depression. He was prostrate on his bed. He couldn't get any energy. He is such an example, I think, of what happens to a person who's got all of the connectedness, beautiful, wonderful relationships, but that's something else that by temperament, by talent, by whatever it is, demands of his mattering instinct something aside from connectedness. He was a heroic striver. And until he found his niche in psychology and philosophy, blending them together in a way that I revere, he couldn't go forward. And then he was known as a person of tremendous energy. He was just always going. And so this to me, I mean, I should say that he had a sister. She was the youngest of those 5 children. And she was also born to be a heroic striver. She had the same kind of temperament as her 2 older brothers, Henry and William. Being a Victorian woman, she had no place to put that. And she turned it into, her mattering project was invalidism. She was an invalid. She was a lifelong invalid. When she finally developed breast cancer at age, I think it was 42, died at 44, she was grateful that at last she had a diagnosable illness. I mean, she was suffering from severe depression. And so to me, this family, the James family, it's almost like an experiment to see what happens when a person, given their temperament, isn't, for whatever reason, isn't given the means to realize what their mattering instinct demands of them. It's very hard to be a heroic striver, but it's so much harder to be born to be a heroic striver and not allowed to be one for whatever reason.
So this illuminates the connection between mattering and mental health. Let's move to Scott Joplin. What does that story tell us?
Yes, Scott Joplin, who was known as King Ragtime. And I don't know if you know his music. It's really wonderful. Yes, it became, he was forgotten for a long time. And then I guess it was in the 70s with, what was that movie?
Oh, The Sting?
The Sting, right. And that music is played. And he was buried in a pauper's grave. And after that, he was dug up and I think he was given a posthumous Pulitzer Prize not for his ragtime music. He didn't take that so very seriously. He wanted to be a classical musician, and he did compose classical pieces. He composed 2 operas, one of which was lost, and the other, Tremonisha, which has been in some sense found, not with the full orchestration that he had provided, but musicians have provided the orchestration. I think it's marvelous. He tried to do something extraordinary. His mattering project was to bring the Black American experience into music and to try to create the highest forms of music from the African American experience. And it was incongruous. It was considered ridiculous. He poured everything into this mattering project, kept perfecting it, could not get anybody to perform it. The idea of an opera using the grand forms of opera from classical music to speak of the African American experience in the United States post-Civil War during Reconstruction was just considered preposterous. Poured everything into it. As I said, died a pauper. He could have just kept creating his ragtime pieces. He could have tried to create more popular forms of music, but to show the African American experience in its most glorious setting, this was his mattering project.
So tell us about the mattering project of your of the neo-Nazi skinhead that you met.
So, I was very interested in where the mattering instinct is really not being realized, and many people are driven to quite horrible ideological extremes. This is very rich pickings for ideologies to go amongst those who are wanting to feel that they don't matter. And I really wanted to just talk to an incel, involuntary celibates, and spent a lot of time online reading their message boards and the extreme things they say, and the resentment is just boiling up because they feel that they don't matter. They're not getting what they feel they need. And they blame it on those from whom they want this, young women. And I was also reading about neo-Nazis, and I really, really wanted to get to know one. Most of them didn't answer me when I wrote to them, but there was this one who answered me. He is an ex-Nazi skinhead. He grew up under terrible circumstances in the really mean streets of Philadelphia. Horrific family life. His mother was a drug addict. His stepfather was a brutal ex-Navy man who would beat this young man. And so much so that sometimes on the way home from school, he would try to get hit by a car. And during one summer, he met some neo-Nazi skinheads. And they were very impressed with him because he actually knew that the enemy. He had gone to school with black kids, and as they hadn't, he was a street warrior in Philadelphia. And then they told him, because he really felt like he didn't matter, they really puffed him up, they flattered him, and they told him, look in the mirror. You are a white, male, heterosexual American. You matter more than all these others. They are stealing your mattering. And this is very typical of certain spheres of the mattering math, to think of mattering as zero sum. To the extent that others matter, they're taking away pieces of the pie from you. That is how he was telling the story in terms of the mattering, of feeling that he mattered, feeling that he was powerful, feeling that he had to punish those who were stealing mattering from him. It is very typical of certain areas, problematic, troubling, and troubled areas of the mattering math, that people feel that others are stealing mattering from them, and there's not enough mattering to go around. I think that's one of the big messages of the book, of ways that we could try to change things so that people would feel that there is enough mattering to go around, that the extent that any of us matter, we all matter to that same extent. I think that's the basics of ethics. He's an example of, in trying to realize this deep motivation, how very wrong things can go. And he fortunately found much more creative, life-fulfilling ways of meeting his mattering instinct, which is why he was willing to talk to me.
So how do you see distorted or threatened mattering playing out in our politics or culture currently?
The ways that we choose to try to realize our mattering instinct, whether it's religiously, spiritually, achievement, competition, socializing, it's so fraught for us. It's so fraught with our emotions. We're staking our lives on this. This is the way that we try to prove to ourselves that we are worth all the attention that we have to give ourselves just to lead our lives. The mere fact that people are living their lives so differently can feel like an affront. I experienced this very much when I was born into a very religious family, and I think I know very well what it feels like to be a religious person. I was very religious, extremely religious until the age of 12 or 13, and then I no more. But I know that when people like me, I am an atheist, talk to religious people, we often kind of talk down to them. And they, as if only they would be rational, they would realize that their life is based on something unsubstantiated. And for their part, religious people often will talk down to people like me. Like, how can we possibly have any purpose in our life? How can we be moral if we don't think that the big guy up there is watching us? It's all over the mattering math. There is this kind of adversarial positioning of people against those who are staking their mattering on something else. The scientists will talk down to the people in the humanities. The people in the humanities will talk down to the people in the sciences. I've experienced all of these in my life. And so there is a deep tendency across the mattering map to universalize one's own way of going about realizing this, because it means so much to us. And we're always uncertain. We don't know. We don't know if we're going about it the right way. That's a really important part of it. Why it's so fraught for us, this uncertainty. And that makes us very defensive, which can make us very intolerant. And we certainly see this in the politics.
If we're taking the mattering instinct seriously, how would this change the way that we think about our schools, our institutions, our politics? What could we do there?
So I think really the first thing to do is to understand this mattering instinct, how it comes about, why we have it. And I think it's rather a beautiful thing about us. We recognize, because we have this great capacity for self-reflection, that we can step outside of our lives and interrogate ourselves, kind of turn our theory of mind that developed in order to understand others, we can turn it on ourselves and discover things about ourselves. And one thing that is glaringly obvious, it is that we pay so much attention to ourselves constantly. We have to. We're biologically determined to. It would seem that we think that we're the most important thing in the whole universe. And short of lunacy, we know that we're not. I mean, all across the mattering map, there are different views of values, what makes life valuable, what are the things we need to do that are valuable in order for ourselves to be valuable. It makes us a value-seeking creature. And it's so easy nowadays to get really appalled by various things. But I always try to see it in terms of this framework, to try to understand what's going wrong, but that it's stemming from something that I find moving about all humans, the mattering instinct. And so I think just to see ourselves and to see others in terms of what it is we share, it gives a deep understanding. To understand is not to accept all of the bad things that it can lead to, but at least it is to understand one another and not see each other as monsters.
And you have a nice quote from Spinoza on this, right?
Yes. I think the quote that you're talking about is, he says, my aim is not to laugh at others, not to weep, not to decry them. My aim is to understand. And I find that extremely inspiring and helpful. But also, if we want to reach people who are reachable, my ex-Nazi friend calls them the wobblies. If you want to, treat them as if they matter. That's what got through to him. Don't curse them, but speak to them as if they matter. Our brains, I don't have to tell you, are the most complicated thing that has been found yet in this universe. They are extremely complicated. They demand a tremendous amount of order. And so, of course, we pay ourselves a tremendous amount of attention. You're thinking about yourself. You're fantasizing. You're daydreaming about yourself. You're remembering with nostalgia. We are self-centered. And we have to be. It's biologically determined. But, as I said, we have this capacity for self-reflection. We can step outside of it. And that's when we become these justificatory creatures. I say instead of being called Homo sapiens, we should be called Homo justificans, the justifying creatures. That's what's really different about us, And it's not our gregariousness. Other animals are also gregarious. Other animals need deep connections, because everything's more complicated in us. Not even bonobos, those wonderful cousins of ours, they don't step outside of themselves and have to justify their way of life, say, why am I worth all of this? We evolve this capacity for self-reflection. That's what brings us up into this other sphere, the sphere of values. It's not enough to just survive and flourish like the other creatures on Earth. We have to justify to ourselves our right to survive and flourish.
So, Rebecca, if a listener felt that his or her life didn't really matter to themselves or to other people, what would you say to them after having written this book?
We really do all matter. I think that's what we're talking about when we talk about the intrinsic dignity of the human. So people really do need some kind of mattering project, whether they collapse it into their need for connectedness or if they have such a temperament that they need other things. I think that they should, first of all, really think about what it is that would make them feel that they mattered. Is it closer connections with others? Might be. Is it some sort of creative outlet? Might be. Maybe spirituality. It's hard to be human.
That was my interview with Rebecca Goldstein. I want to return to the idea at the center of today's conversation that every one of us is running a mattering project to be seen, to be needed, to be effective, to weigh something in the world. Rebecca argues that this is the deep engine that lies below our decisions, below our identities, our conflicts, our cooperation. So we just talked about how this mattering instinct draws a kind of inner cartography that tells you what counts and what doesn't. And we saw through a few stories from her book how different these maps can be. For Scott Joplin, his map placed a huge red circle around an opera that the world generally ignored. For William James, mattering was intertwined with mental survival, clawing his way out of despair, deciding that his choices could make a difference, that his life could be something other than a footnote. For the former skinhead, mattering initially meant inflicting harm to feel stronger, and then later redrawing his map to realize that significance doesn't have to be stolen from other people. Those are very different lives, but they're all shaped by the common question of what has to be true for me to feel that I matter. From the neuroscience point of view, this is a question about circuitry, how our systems of reward and fear and social belonging get trained over time. From Rebecca's philosophical point of view, it's about value and meaning, what we treat as real, as precious, as worth sacrifice. And the hope is that when we put those views together, we can get more traction on understanding ourselves and our current moment. So I want to return to that line from the philosopher Baruch Spinoza, the line that Rebecca loves. What Spinoza wrote is, quote, "I have made a ceaseless effort not to ridicule, not to bewail, not to scorn human actions, but to understand them." What he's saying here is that instead of reacting with laughter or tears or hate, one can undertake a calm, rational inquiry to grasp the causes behind human behaviors and events, viewing them as natural consequences. Spinoza was making a call for intellectual clarity and emotional detachment to comprehend the world, and that was a hallmark of his rationalist philosophy. So, the key call for us here is to try to understand how different people run different mattering projects. This gives us a different starting point than we usually take. Instead of asking, how can anybody believe that? We can ask, what does this person believe they need in order to matter? And here's a small experiment that you might try after this episode. Notice your own mattering map. When you get defensive in an argument, or when you feel invisible at work, or when you're strangely proud of something tiny, ask, what part of my mattering is being threatened or affirmed right now? So do this also with someone that you maybe find infuriating. Ask, what mattering project is their behavior serving? You might not love the answer, but it can shift you out of scorn into a stance closer to understanding. The point is to recognize that beneath all the surface differences, political and cultural and personal, there's a universally shared architecture, a brain that needs to register, to count, to feel that this brief candle leaves some kind of trace. If we can see that, if we can talk about mattering as much as we talk about stress or diet or sleep, we might be able to redesign our interactions in ways that take this into account. And to each of us, the invitation from this conversation is to participate in that process a bit more consciously, to ask, how do I want to matter and to whom? Go to eagleman.com/podcast for more information and to find further reading. Join the weekly discussions on my Substack, and check out and subscribe to Inner Cosmos on YouTube for videos of each episode and to leave comments. Until next time, I'm David Eagleman, and this is Inner Cosmos.